Okay, so what we're about to do is unpack a series of strategic reports that, honestly, they outline a chilling new vision for global power. It's one that completely redefines the very idea of what an empire even is. Let's get right into it.
Rule without occupation. Just let that phrase sink in for a second. That's the core concept, the guiding principle of this entire strategy. It's a signal that we're seeing a fundamental shift away from the wars of the past and towards something, well, something much more subtle and maybe, just maybe, a lot more effective.
So, what does a 21st century empire actually look like? First things first, forget what you know about invasions and occupying armies. The analysis we're about to walk through suggests the new model is less about military conquest and way more about something like a corporate-style hostile takeover, but for an entire nation-state.
So this first part of our briefing unpacks this new model. The core idea is that the costly, bloody lessons from interventions like Iraq, they've been learned. And the result? A playbook that is ruthlessly efficient, designed for a world where traditional warfare is just too expensive.
Now, what's really fascinating about this slide is how it frames the shift. The old model, right? That meant American soldiers policing foreign streets, a super high-cost, high-risk quagmire. The new model, as it's laid out in this hypothetical Venezuelan scenario, it outsources all the messy parts of governing to a local proxy, which minimizes American costs and responsibility, all while maximizing control over what actually matters.
All right, so how would this actually work in practice? Well, the reports use a really detailed scenario involving Venezuela to illustrate the mechanics of this new kind of influence. And this isn't just theory, it's practically a step-by-step guide to what these documents call shadow control. And the process itself? Wow, it's broken down into three, honestly, kind of chillingly simple steps. First, you at a local transitional government handle the difficult day-to-day work of actually running the country. Second, you seize direct or indirect control of the nation's most valuable assets. And third, you frame the entire operation not as an invasion, but as support for democracy, which pretty much neutralizes any international criticism. And this right here, this illustrates the crucial point. While the proxy government is busy managing public services, American advisors and corporations would be the ones effectively controlling the oil company, the national treasury, and the military and intelligence services. I mean, you don't need to fly your flag over the Capitol when you own the key to the national bank and you control the oil valve. But here's where it gets bigger. The reports argue this whole Venezuela operation isn't just about one country. It's a powerful, calculated message being sent to every other major player on the world stage. It's a way of demonstrating that the old rules of international relations, they just don't apply anymore.
So the message to China is basically a financial weapon. The new U.S.-backed government could just declare that the billions of dollars in loans from China under the old regime are odious debt, the corrupt debts of a dictator, and simply refuse to pay them back. Just like that, overnight, a rival's economic leverage is wiped out without a single shot being fired.
And for Russia, this signal is just as loud, but it's a military one. Any agreements allowing Russian strategic bombers or mercenaries on Venezuelan soil would be immediately canceled. This would be the biggest rollback of Russian influence in the Western Hemisphere since the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's a clear warning to stay focused on your own backyard.
And what about America's allies in Europe? Well, the playbook puts them in a really tough spot. They might object on principle, sure, but the new government would legally invite U.S. companies in. And facing their own energy needs, European nations would have very little choice but to buy the now stable, U.S.-controlled Venezuelan oil, which means they'd be effectively endorsing the new reality whether they like it or not.
But listen, this strategy doesn't end with oil in the Americas. As reports make crystal clear, this is just the first move in a much larger global conflict, a hunt for the critical resources needed to power the 21st century military and tech industries.
Just take a look at this. These aren't just obscure minerals. They are the absolute essential building blocks of modern warfare. You've got antimony for armor-piercing bullets, tungsten for missile warheads, titanium for F-35 fighter jets. The problem? The supply chains for these are pretty much dominated by strategic rivals.
So that's the problem. How do you solve it? How do you break that dependency? Well, the analysis outlines a global, three-pronged strategy, and it's tailored to each region's unique political landscape. You control what you can directly, you bypass what you can't, and you co-opt everything in between.
In Africa, the strategy is bypass. See, China controls many of the mines that produce cobalt and copper, and the shipping routes they rely on. The plan? Fund and secure a new railway, the Lobito Corridor, that reroutes these minerals west to the Atlantic, completely sidestepping Chinese-controlled ports. It's literally described as resource blood vessel bypass surgery on a continental scale.
Now, in Central Asia, Russia and China's backyard, the approach is way more subtle. It's called co-opt. Instead of sending in troops, you send in investment banks. The reports detail a strategy of commercial occupation, where U.S. firms buy up significant stakes in critical mines. That way, if a rival power tries to interfere, they're not just creating a political incident. They're directly attacking American financial assets, and that triggers a much, much more serious response.
So you've got this new great game playing out. But what does it all mean for the traditional allies? You know, the ones caught in the middle. According to this analysis, it puts them in an incredibly difficult position, forcing them to navigate a world where the old rules of being an ally just don't seem to apply anymore.
See, the threat is no longer a conventional military one. For these middle powers, the reports are highlighting the rise of what's called hybrid warfare. This is a strategy of using non-military tools, things like economic sanctions, currency manipulation, even support for internal opposition, to pressure a government into changing its policies without ever firing a single shot.
And ultimately, all of this leads to a pretty stark ultimatum for allied nations. The analysis suggests they're going to be forced to make a binary choice. Either you align completely with the U.S. economic and security bloc and say goodbye to the lucrative Chinese market, or you risk being treated as an adversary. It's presented as less of a choice and more of a geopolitical reality.
So where does that leave us? What does this all add up to? It culminates in a new set of rules for the global order, one that fundamentally redefines what it means to be an ally, and, for that matter, what it means to be a sovereign nation.
So welcome to the age of the transactional alliance. In this model, the question is no longer, hey, do you share our values? It's what can you do for us? Your alignment is measured by your tangible, practical contributions to the U.S.-led supply chain and security architecture. It turns long-standing friendships into cold, hard balance sheet calculations.
Which leads to this final, really powerful concept from the reports: subcontracting the empire. In this vision, the United States sets the grand strategy, securing resources, containing rivals, the whole shebang, while its allies are expected to act as regional managers and functional subcontractors, executing specific parts of the plan, whether that's refining minerals or policing shipping lanes.
And that leaves us with a profound final question that's raised by this entire body of analysis. In a world of transactional alliances and shadow control, a world where your economic utility outweighs your political ideology, is the very idea of national sovereignty still a fundamental right? Or has it become just another asset to be leveraged, bought, and sold on the geopolitical market?